Vedic Astrology podcast is brought to you by a dedicated and intimate community of patrons. Perhaps you'd like to join us where we meet every week to check in and talk astrology, and where we have monthly gatherings to deep dive into our personal charts, to study Vedic astrology, and to apply and harness transits. Join us today, and thanks for listening to the Vedic Astrology podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Season 5 of the Vedic Astrology podcast. It's a lot to get my head around, Season 5. And it's been such a break since I saw you last. I didn't intend to have quite this sabbatical between the end of Season 4 and the beginning of Season 5. But many of you will know that 2025 has been a big health year here with my family. And in July, on the back of all the other things that have happened, we got some quite serious health news, and surgery was involved and treatments. And it was quite intense. And then 6 to 7 weeks later, there was, once they'd analysed the pathology, there was the get out of jail card free, and we've been returning to normal life here. And so I just haven't had a chance to be with you guys here on the Vedic Astrology podcast, but I'm delighted to be back. And while I've been away, the podcast continues to go from strength to strength, and we have published over 75 episodes, and we've been downloaded more than 50,000 times. And I'm often receiving those emails from the podcast, the people who monitor who's downloading what, to say how well the Vedic Astrology podcast is doing in its market. So thanks to all of you. And although I haven't been recording episodes, I certainly have been very much enjoying my deepening and understanding of Vedic astrology during this year of 2025. One of the things that I've started doing this year is providing written reports to my clients, as well as catching up with them face-to-face on a video conference. In advance, I've been preparing their report in a written way. I've always been an astrologer who does many pages of research, usually some 30 pages of shorthand. But it's only recently that I've decided to offer all of that to my clients. And I try to write it in a way that shares an explanation of my reasoning and what the astrology is all about. And I think just that process of writing so much about astrology has just deepened my love for this subject and for this job and this role. So I feel that I understand Vedic astrology even more. And then right at that time, the last time I was with you guys in July, was also invited by Ryan Kurzak to speak to a new group of students who are coming to astrology not necessarily wanting to become astrologers, but wanting to understand Vedic astrology as a spiritual practice, how to be in harmony with one's life, how to have more self-knowledge through Vedic astrology. And I was invited to speak about the components of a birth chart. And when I put some contemplation time, originally I thought I might talk about these components. We're talking about the rashis, or the signs, and the bhavas, or the houses, and the grahas, or the planets. So these three things, signs, houses, and planets, these are the components that then go on to describe all of the complexity that we're all experiencing. So originally, when I thought about it, I was thinking I might talk about Rubik's Cubes. I don't know if you're in my generation, but Rubik's Cubes were a huge game toy when I was a child, and my brothers and I would end up pulling the pieces out to put them back together to get the color faces on each side. And we never really on our own figured out the method to unscramble a Rubik's Cube. But now if you go on the internet or on YouTube, you can have all of these instructions how to do the Rubik's Cube. And I like it as a metaphor for understanding the components of a birth chart, because the Rubik's Cube has this three-dimensional problem solving that it's not enough just to look at the white side of the Rubik Cube and get those 9 boxes all to be white, that is relatively achievable, but all the rest of the cube remains scrambled. And I think why the Rubik's Cube is a good metaphor is because as a Vedic astrologer, you're keeping a lot of moving pieces in your mind at one time. And the other thing that I like about it is that if you do go and watch these videos or read the instructions, sometimes they're counterintuitive. You follow this instruction, you're like, oh, it's looking like I'm getting closer to it. And then you have to make these moves, these unexpected moves that you wouldn't anticipate, that seem to destroy the pattern only to bring it back better and stronger. And I think that is a useful metaphor for reading a birth chart, because sometimes maybe people who are attracted to astrology and Vedic astrology, there might be things that intuitively jump out at us straight away when we sit with a chart. And then there's a lot of value in looking under the hood, in looking at what is the Shadbala of that planet and what planetary aspects is that planet receiving, and what Rashi aspects is the field receiving as well, and how far away is it from a lunar node, and just taking the time to go in a bit more detail, a bit deeper, perhaps using a step-by-step approach. So I like that with the Rubik's Cube as well. If you want to solve it, there's some backward steps. It's not all becoming clearer and clearer. Sometimes it looks like it's coalescing and then you have to make these moves. And astrology is a bit like that. But actually, in the end, what I did speak to these spiritual seekers about was about how I'm beginning to see the metaphor of a timetable, a university timetable. Our birth chart is like that timetable that makes a campus an essential and thriving learning environment. University campuses are full of students, and they're full of learning venues. They're full of curriculum and libraries, and they're full of teachers. So all of these things are happening in a dynamic way. And if you just visit a university campus, we're talking about a physical one, as a visitor or as on your first day, they can be overwhelming because there's just so many possibilities and so many things going on all the time that without any instruction, it would be hard to know how to make the most of this campus. And that's where each student's individual timetable becomes so important, because it takes the variety of the campus. It takes the potential of the campus and it pulls out the subjects, the units that you're enrolled in, and tells you which room that unit is in, on what day to turn up, and who the teacher is and what textbooks you need. So this timetable is what makes the complex institution of a campus work so well. And I've always been fascinated by timetables because I was lucky enough in a previous role to learn about systems theory, and that there are 5 things that make up a sustainable system. And one of those things is the timetable, like it's the structure that allows all of that complexity of a self-sustaining system. So here I am thinking about timetables and realizing that Earth Campus, a metaphor for our experience here, is perhaps Earth Campus, that Earth Campus provides a whole lot of teaching venues. It provides a whole lot of learning experiences, and it provides a variety of teachers as well. So today I thought I would share this metaphor with you as well. And if you would like to follow along or go have a look at my thoughts written out in text, I have popped it up on my website. So that is at fionamarks.com, and then it's /Earth-Campus. So EARTH-Campus, CAMPUS. And you can follow along. So the metaphor for me goes like this, that on Earth Campus, there are all these teaching venues. And if we use Vedic astrology as our tool for this metaphor, then we know that there are 12 teaching venues at Earth campus. And these are the 12 30-degree segments of the ecliptic. And as the planets travel through these segments that I'm going to call for this metaphor classrooms, as they travel through these classrooms, they have access to the kind of resources the classroom has to offer. And if you think of your own experience of schools and campuses, each classroom can be quite differently equipped. So even if we go back to our primary school experiences, there are classrooms that have desks and chairs and a whiteboard or blackboard or a projection board. And they facilitate a certain kind of learning with a teacher at the front and students sitting down. And then there's the gym classroom, which might be outdoor or indoor, but it's very different. The equipment that it has available, it has a lot of space so that people can move freely and exercise. It might have exercise equipment or equipment for playing games. So maybe there are balls or ropes or hoops. Maybe there's a football goal or a basketball hoop. This gym classroom has its very own resources that facilitate what is taught in that gym classroom. And then there might be, going back in the day, there might be a computer room, which is a venue with loads of computers, or I guess these days this would be the laptops that you can bring, and this enables a certain kind of learning. There might be a library classroom at this school where there's a lot of resources available in terms of knowledge and people's research that's already been reviewed and published. There might be an art room where the kind of equipment involves paints and crayons and pens and paper, scissors and all of that craft kind of material. So what can be taught in this art classroom is very different than what's taught in the gymnasium classroom or the library classroom. Maybe there's a drama room with a stage with lights and curtains and places to hang scenery. And again, this facilitates a certain type of learning. So just like a school or a campus has different venues, I'm suggesting in this metaphor that each of the rashis or each of the signs is a teaching venue. And you can go have a look at Earth-Campus to see each of my ideas of what these signs' teaching rooms might look like. But for example, if we start at the beginning at Aries, we know that Mars has designed Aries to be a classroom that teaches courage and initiative. That is what Mars wants to teach on planet Earth, and Aries is the perfect space to do that. So if it was a classroom, it might be an open-air gymnasium with a climbing wall where you can do the impossible feat of climbing straight up a wall. And it might have those gymnasium equipment that you can practice drills. And over gets stronger and stronger. You can push yourself harder and harder, set goals for yourself of what you're going to lift or how long you're going to carry something. And each day you can monitor your progress. But it might also be like an open cut mine where you can get resources from the ground that you would put in another piece of equipment in Aries classroom, like a smelting facility where you could create tools. You can use your logic to solve problems and invent tools that have never been, or engineer solutions that have never been made before. So this would be a learning space that is full of stimulation for your courage, your initiative, getting you to try things and solve problems. Whereas right next door in Taurus classroom, we might find now that we're in an Earth classroom that has a feminine energy to it, that is receptive and that is slow, and where the nourishment of the earth is going to seep into the students by just slowing down. They're going to receive the rejuvenation that they need. And it would be like a glorious pantry full of resources, whether that is food or money or whatever material resources we could need. Taurus is a storeroom for those kinds of things. And it's also like a hobby farm where slowly food is cooked and prepared slowly, that's grown in the land, and where the pace of life just supports the natural seasons. And the warm smells come out of this hobby farm kitchen and everyone can slow down a little bit. Might be an idea of a Taurus classroom. And I invite you to hop on and have a look at some ideas for the other classrooms that are perhaps on Earth campus. So if you're looking at your birth chart as a timetable for Earth campus, you now know that your timetable shows the 12 classrooms that are available at Earth campus. And none of us are going to have planets in each of those 12. Because there aren't 12 planets. So you're definitely going to notice on first glance that some classrooms have no teachers, no planets in them, and other classrooms do have teachers in them or do have several teachers maybe in the same classroom. So immediately the metaphor begins to help us understand. And then after we understand that perhaps the signs are classrooms, if we keep going with the metaphor, then I think that houses are perhaps the curriculum of Earth campus. That if you incarnate on Earth, there are 12 subjects to the curriculum here on Earth campus. If you incarnated somewhere else, there would be a different number of classrooms and a different number of curriculum units. But here on Earth campus, let's say that there are 12 units of study that all Earthlings are working their way through. And those units of study are the houses. Unit 1 is the topic that relates to the body and the self, the personality and the life path. So wherever our Unit 1 curriculum is being taught, that is the classroom through which we have the resources to discover ourselves. Unit 2 might be about the resources and responsibilities that Earthlings have. How do we value ourselves? How do we have that innate sense of value? How do we nourish and make sure that we have the resources that this being requires? So Unit 2 teaches us resources and responsibilities. And this will be happening in a classroom on Earth campus. And we can go around for the 12 units, and I encourage you to go have a look at Earth-campus to check in with what are the 12 units you can study here on Earth. Now, as you then look at your birth chart, a moment ago we could see which classrooms had teachers in them. Now we can tell which units have teachers and which units the teacher is not in the right classroom for. So we're really beginning to understand now a bit more about our timetable. Because generally at school or at university, there should be a teacher in the classroom. Back in the day, these days, everything's online, maybe it's a bit different, but if we think more of that archaic model of teaching. So now we know something about the signs perhaps being the classrooms and the houses perhaps being the curriculum of Earth campus. The third component of this metaphor is the teachers or the professors, and that is what I think the planets are. So each of these planets, these 7 planets, have things that they are trying to teach. And we talked briefly about Mars is trying to teach courage to Earthlings. And he's doing that through Aries, which we already discussed, an open air, exploratory, initiative-driven, courage-driven, rewarding risk and thrill kind of venue. So Mars designed that venue, Aries classroom, to help teach courage. And he also designed Scorpio classroom, which is his more feminine approach to learning and teaching, where he recognizes that the thing that you might need courage for the most is actually to face your own inner demons and to have the courage to look into the darkness and to go through your psychology. And so Scorpio, this female water sign, is perhaps more like an escape room where you have to use all of your intelligence and your instincts to find your way out of a locked facility. Or maybe it's like a deep sea exploratory center where you dive into those areas of the trenches and the abyss, those parts of the ocean that apparently are more foreign to us than even deep space itself. So we have teachers who have a specific style of teaching that they want to help Earthlings with. And Mars, sticking with Mars because we're here right at the beginning, Mars has a demanding style of teaching. We could say that Mars rather likes to throw his students into the deep end and let them learn to solve problems and take their own initiative. As well as that, he loves to drill students, keep them practicing scenarios so that when that moment comes, they instinctually know how to respond to a new challenge. So he's a relatively demanding teacher. Right next door, we have Taurus classroom owned by Venus. So another teacher on campus is Venus, Professor Venus, and she has two teaching venues as well. Like Mars, she designed her own venue called Taurus, her female venue, where she wants to ensure that Earthlings know their innate value. They know what they are worth. And this is because she also designed her masculine classroom of Libra, which is all about trade and negotiation. We could think of the Libra classroom as being somewhere like a souk market where barter and trading is taking place in all of the most exotic and desirable experiences and material goods. But it's also a convention center where people can bring their ideas and their innovations and trade them with others and expound the benefits of their wares, even if it's ideas. And it's also the UN or any kind of diplomatic space where people can meet from many different backgrounds and cultures, and through the process of understanding value and trade, they can overcome those cultural differences and make agreements that will facilitate the flow of energy, which is what Libra really allows us to do. So you can see that each of the planets is its own professor and has its own teaching style. We talked about Mars being demanding and perhaps throwing people in the deep end and drilling them. Venus is a gentle planet that is going to provide for her students the support and the resources through Taurus that help this person to know that they're valuable. Because once we have that sense of innate value and we're loyal to that, we're not going to sell ourselves out on that trading room floor where we're exchanging with other Earthlings. And so it is that we have all of these professors with their classrooms that they've designed and their own unique teaching styles. Of course, we have the Sun as the chancellor of Earth Campus because really it is the Sun that dictates those 30-degree segments. Our relationship with the Sun, this Earth Campus, our relationship with the Sun astronomically means that we have 30 days basically in each of these 12 spaces before we would complete one orbit. So the sun is the chancellor and the moon as the vice chancellor, and they have their own teaching venues as well. So now you guys have the three components of this Earth campus metaphor, and it begins to empower us to look at the birth chart and see probably one of the things that makes incarnating on Earth so confusing is that as soon as you pull out your birth chart now, you will notice that probably most of your professors are not teaching in their venues. And this is like the wild card of incarnating, that wouldn't it be great if Mars was standing in Aries and helping us with the taking initiative and coming up with new ideas, and he was just making challenge after challenge to give us even more confidence in our own instinct. But the truth is that Mars could be teaching from any one of these 12 classrooms. And some of those classrooms are going to suit Mars better than others, which Mars is really dominating the conversation, but we'll just follow through with one. Maybe that's why it makes more sense to follow through with one. That we can see then that Mars is going to be exalted actually in Capricorn, because Capricorn classroom is like the Colosseum where you fight for your life to win your freedom. And you can't be questioning it and intellectualizing whether it's fair or not, whether you should have been captured and have this chance to free yourself or not. You just have to get out of there, whatever it takes. And it could be really ugly. And this plays exactly to Mars's strength, that the instinct to fight and to survive no matter what goes hand in hand with the very venue of the Colosseum. Or another way to think about Capricorn would be like when you watch those reality shows and someone is dumped into some forest or desert or ice mountain, and they have to survive. They have maybe they've been allowed to bring 3 resources, a rope and some matches and whatever, a jacket. And then everything else, they're on their own. They have to capture their own food and make their own fire and make their own shelter. This would be another way to describe Capricorn classroom. And Mars thrives in that engineering of how do I solve this problem, sharpened even more by the very reality of surviving. So we can see why then Mars as a professor on Earth campus is going to thrive teaching over there at Colosseum of Capricorn. But we can equally see if we go and find that Professor Mars is teaching from Cancer classroom, where Cancer is a female teaching classroom that is so accepting and so absorbing that it's the perfect place for music. It's if you've ever been in a recording studio or a really quiet place, it almost draws out of you your feelings because it's so quiet. It accepts from you takes away all of the noise and out seeps your feelings. But it's also a vast ocean teaching venue where there are no milestones, there are no land posts. You can swim for 100 days in one direction, which Mars has got that determination and the courage that, okay, I'm going to swim in that direction. But you can't even tell after 100 days if you have made any progress, or are you swimming in a great large circle? You have no idea where you've been, where you've come from, where you're going. So for Mars, there's no engineering or problem solving here that Mars can do that with its physical force and effort that is going to orientate it in this situation, because the venue itself is not designed to be conquered. Cancer isn't about conquering. It's about acceptance, complete relaxation, openness, the scariest of all, completely vulnerable. So here we see that teachers are going to perform differently in different venues. So you might notice that now as you look at your timetable. If you're lucky, you might have a teacher or some teachers in the right classrooms, but many of us are going to have all of our teachers teaching from the wrong classroom. And some of those classrooms are easier to adapt to and some of them are harder to adapt to. And perhaps the final thing to say about this Earth campus is that we can use the ascendant sign, the Lagna, or your rising sign. We can use that whole sign that becomes the first house. And we can imagine that this is like a college at the Earth's campus in this metaphor. It's like your homeroom or your sorority or your living quarters where everybody in that dorm, you guys are all a particular ascendant or rising sign. And once we know which dorm or college we belong to, then we begin to understand what the textbooks are for this Earth campus. And this is a little bit what unlocks really the timetable, that by knowing what your rising sign is, and this is why astrologers always want to know your birth time, because it tells us what was rising on the eastern horizon, and that is going to set your college inside Earth campus. Because then we know which teacher is in charge of your college, and we know which classroom is going to be the one that teaches your sense of self. So let's move away from Mars, for which we have given plenty of good attention. Let's take Sagittarius ascendant. If we know it's a Sagittarius ascendant, we know that Jupiter is going to be the planet that owns this homeroom. He runs the college that I belong to if I'm a Sagittarius ascendant. And this means that that first unit of who am I, who is the self, what is my life path, what is my personality, what have I come here to do on day one, is taking place in Sagittarius classroom. And that classroom is like a civic space of debating, philosophizing. You could imagine like those kind of public spaces where arguments are discussed and the merits of different philosophical approaches to life. And that by participating in this public debate, all of us are getting wiser. We're finding out the right teachers for us. Who are we going to be led by? And ideas are being tested, philosophies are being tested to see which one is truly the most helpful and accurate in being an earthly. It would also, I'm pretty sure Sagittarius classroom would be where the astronomy tower is. So there would be some big telescope pointing up at the stars, and that study of astronomy that back in the day was the study that included everything. It included mathematics, it included physics, it included, of course, astronomy, but because it related to man and God, it included philosophy and the values and the forms and the underlying hum that is the fabric of the universe. Pretty sure that would be in Sagittarius classroom as well. So this person's sense of self and their textbook for that first unit will be written by Jupiter for the Sagittarius classroom. So perhaps that textbook might be something like The Fire of Knowledge Guides Us on Our Pilgrimage. That would be the tome that you would need to buy if you're a Sagittarius ascendant and you're studying Unit 101. And if Jupiter is there teaching in that first classroom, he's going to inspire you, light that fire of inspiration that is going to guide you on a pilgrimage towards his other sign, Pisces, the final sign of the zodiac. And then once you know that you're a Sagittarius ascendant, you're going to get your whole book list because for your first unit and the room that you're supposed to turn up to is Sagittarius, but you also automatically know that your second unit, this is my values and resources, for you is going to be taught in Capricorn Classroom, which we already discussed is a kind of survival place. And the book, the textbook that you might need to buy for Unit 2 might be something more like endurance is value. So just surviving is what adds value. And then Unit 3 would be taught in Aquarius Classroom, and Saturn would have written the textbook for Unit 3 if you come from Sagittarius College. And that classroom is all about your skills, your interests, your hobbies. And so Aquarius, the teaching venue, is like a humanitarian, non-government organization, refugee camp, just providing makeshift, like whatever we have, we can make a dam here, we can make some tents here, we can store donations of food and clothing here and try to help this community have less suffering, some kind of venue like that. It would also, Aquarius, be, I imagine, like deep space exploration where you're out there on your own exploring and learning, but you're only able to do that because of all of the thousands of people involved in making sure that your spacesuit, your oxygen, your rocket, your communication back to the planet, your mission guidelines, all of that is being coordinated by the institutions and the societies and the communities and the ways that humans can achieve amazing things if they pool all of their resources to achieve the same goal. So if you were looking to get your textbook as a Sagittarius College person, you might be getting one called Exploring Institutional Assets that's going to help you focus your curiosity and exploration onto a way that institutions add value for all of us, for example. So your college, Sagittarius College, in the example, sets you up for which textbook it is. But let's imagine that you would be, instead of a Sagittarius Ascendant, let's imagine that you would be a Leo College Earthling. And then your first unit, Understanding the Self, is going to be taking place in Leo, which is, of course, the performance stage, the area where we can learn to stand up in front of others, to lead them, to inspire them. How do we get the practice at being the light that other people can follow? Be that radiant sun. And the textbook for Unit 101 in that case might be the self as the center. And Unit 2, My Values and Resources, would be being taught by Mercury in Virgo. And so the textbook might be Process Improvement to Increase Your Value and Resource Management. And we could just go through this one after another. The different colleges all have 12 units that they're teaching, but the mix of which teacher wrote the textbook flavors what that textbook is going to be about. And your Vedic astrology birth chart can be your timetable that unlocks your textbook list, because many of us are wandering around Earth Campus not knowing which textbooks we're supposed to have, because you can see other students at Earth Campus who are thriving and you think, oh, that must be how Unit 1 is taught, or that must be how Unit 5 is taught, or what Unit 7 is about. Because look, she's so successful, or he's a good example. And so we go buy those textbooks, or we try to live a life aligned with that kind of textbook, and it doesn't feel natural or work for us because we're coming from a different college. So I think that Vedic astrology is very helpful in unlocking our timetable so we know which textbooks relate to our life journey. And then we can use the timetable even more to see where is the teacher teaching that from. So the Vedic astrology birth chart can unlock your timetable even more than this by showing you where your teacher is teaching from. So let's go back to our sun example. It's going to want to teach, if you're a Leo college student, the sun is going to want to teach you how to understand yourself through a textbook that's called The Self as the Center. And imagine if they're teaching that in Leo and they've got that venue where the very theatre space or the lecture podium that you're on helps people look at you and clearly see what it is that your radiance that you're sharing with others. But imagine if the sun is teaching that over there in the Colosseum. The self is the center. We probably don't want to draw attention to ourselves. If we're in the Colosseum and we're facing the lions or whatever it is, there's a kind of benefit in sneaking around the edges and finding that crack and way to escape or way to survive. But if we teach the self as the center, then we are definitely going to be facing those lions there in the Colosseum, because our textbook, Understand the Self, being the self as the center, is being taught by a teacher who is standing in the Colosseum when they're teaching it. It's going to flavor the way that we experience this textbook, because what the teacher has to draw on as resources is dictated by being in Capricorn. So by this point in the conversation, now we're getting into that nitty-gritty where everyone's chart is so unique that I don't want to paint with a broad brush and block anybody into thinking that this describes them or doesn't describe them. But perhaps you find the Earth Campus metaphor useful as a way of understanding or looking at the birth chart in a new way, in an empowering way. So I encourage you to drop on over to the website and have a look at the Earth Campus metaphor, which is at Fiona Marks /Earth-Campus. And I loved speaking to these seekers, spiritual seekers about astrology. And for that reason, I'm offering a guided pathway through the apprenticeship. If you would like to learn proper Vedic astrology in a step-by-step way, in a rigorous way, from a teacher that you trust, but you're a little bit overwhelmed that it's an apprenticeship and I don't want to be a professional astrologer and maybe it's too technical for me, I'm inviting you to come and join me on the guided pathway, and we will meet once a month and take all of that rich, insightful content from the apprenticeship and make sure that we bring it down to language that we can understand. For example, like the Earth Campus, a way to take the important technical aspects of astrology. I'm here in my guidance pathway to help you know which of those are important, how to apply them to your own chart. If what you really want is to become your own personal astrologer, you want to use Vedic astrology as a way to help process your karma, as a way to be more present to what Earth Campus has to offer. So I do invite you to have a look at that. That is at fionamarks.com/apprentice-guidance. So I look forward to catching up with you. Maybe you would like to join me on Patreon. We get together and have so much fun about astrology. There are weekly catch-ups, and then there are topics that we meet together every month, deep diving into your chart or studying mythology together. So maybe you want to join me on Patreon. Maybe you'd like to check out my Earth Campus metaphor, or maybe you're feeling called to learn more about astrology, take your interest in astrology, and with my guidance, walk together through the apprenticeship pathway. Thanks so much for listening to the Vedic Astrology Podcast and hanging in while I have been away. And I look forward to seeing you next time we're together for the Vedic Astrology Podcast. Bye, everyone.